Okay, developers, welcome back. In this video, we're going to create a simple REST API using API Gateway and combine it with Lambdas. We're going to do it all using the AWS CDK. So APIs allow us to make get, post, put, and delete requests to send, return, and manipulate data on the back end. So using AWS CDK, it's surprisingly easy to get started writing and deploying REST APIs just using code. Okay, so we're back again with the CDK template, which you can get on the link below the video. We have our source folder, Lambda folder, our constructs, and our main.js file. I think we're going to start off with the easiest part, which is the Lambda functions. So let's create a folder inside Lambdas called cart. Inside there, we're going to do create.js. From here, we're going to create our handler. So module.exports.handler. That's going to be async. And then we're going to take in the event and context. So on the event is going to be our data. We're going to have product, which is going to be await json.parse and event.body. And again, this is just for demonstration purposes. In the future, we're going to create a full REST API with connections to a database and full CRUD capabilities. But right now, let's just mock things out. We're going to log out this data. Just so you can see how it looks when you pass up data in the body. Then we're going to have a response. It's going to have a status code 200. And the body is going to be JSON stringify. I'm going to have a message. I'm going to do cart created. And then we're going to return that response. So this example is not actually creating a cart. It's just going to show us how the post request works and how we get data off the body. Now inside Lambdas, let's create a new folder. I'm going to call that products. I'm going to create a new file inside that called getAll.js. Inside here, we're going to create a fake database. I'm going to call const items. And let's have item 001. It's going to have a description. Let's say blue jumper. Don't know if you call it a sweater or maybe even a cardigan. We're going to have color and we're going to spell it the English way. We're going to have a size. It's going to be large because I'm a big boy. And then price, I'm going to do it in euros, 24.99. So then let's just copy this over. The second one, 002. Let's just say that's a red jumper. Color is red. Size is small. And the price for a small one is going to be $19.99. Bargain. Now we need to create our handler to access this fake database. So let's create that. So module.exports.handler. It's going to be async. And then we're going to have const response. Status code 200. Body json.stringify. And then we're going to stringify all the items from the database. From there, we're going to return the response. Again, in a few videos time, we're going to have access to DynamoDB. We're going to access items in a database, query specific items, but right now, let's just get this simple example up so you can see how it works. So now that we have two handlers, we've got our create cart handler and get all items from the database handler. Let's create our API stack. So inside constructs, we're going to have simple API stack.js. From here, I'm going to create a class, simple API stack. That's going to extend stack, which comes from AWS CDK lib. From there, I'm going to call the constructor with scope, not scope, scope, ID, and props, and then call super with the same. I cannot spell today, and then props. The first thing we're going to do is create our API. So const API equals new REST API, and that comes from CDK lib API gateway. Going to take in this, and we're going to name it simple REST API. Now we need to hook up our Lambda functions. So I'm going to do const get all products. That's going to be a new function. That function comes from AWS Lambda on the CDK lib. I'm going to take in this. I'm going to call it get all products function. Again, we need the runtime. Runtime is going to come from AWS Lambda, and it's going to be node 18. Define where the handler lives. This one is get all products. Inside our Lambda functions, we have a folder called products and then getall.js. So let's do that. So we've got products, getall.handler. Again, we have to tell it where the code actually lives. So we're going to do code from AWS Lambda again, and then from asset. Now, where do all of our Lambdas live? Where does products live? It lives in source and then Lambdas. So src Lambdas. Now we do the same thing with our cart. So create cart, we're just going to copy this over, rename it, create cart. Let's rename this, create cart function. Same runtime. The handler, we're going to update the handler. So that will be inside cart, and that will be create.handler. And then it lives in the same place as our get all products. So that can stay the same, source and then Lambdas. Now we're going to create an integration so that these Lambdas can live somewhere inside our API. So we're going to do const get all products integration. And that's going to be a new Lambda integration from API gateway. And that's going to take in our get all products Lambda function. Going to do the same thing for the create cart. So create cart integration. I forgot to add new here. There we go. Give us some more space. So that's a new Lambda integration. And that's going to take in our create cart Lambda function. Let's just double check this. Lambda integration. Yep, I haven't misspelled that. And it comes from RestApi. I think we're good to go. I accidentally imported insights, so let's get rid of that. Okay. So we have our two integrations. Now we're going to add some URL paths on our REST API that we can call. So the first path we're going to add is going to be products. So we can call our URL /products and get all of them. So that's going to be const products resource. And it's going to be API root. On the root of the API, we're going to add a resource. I'm going to call that products. Now on this resource, on the products resource, we want to add a method. Add method. We're going to add a get method. We want to get all of the items. And then we're going to add our integration, get all products integration. So now when we call our URL, we can do /products, a get request, and that gives us all of our items. And then for the cart, we're going to have a cart resource. Hopefully I'm spelling this correctly as I rush through before my kids wake up. We're going to add a resource. I'm going to call this cart. So the URL /cart. And then we need to add a method on this. So cart resource dot add method. Going to do post request. We're going to send data up to the cart. And add our integration onto that. And then finally, we're going to export this class. So module.exports equals API. Nope, I called it simple API. There we go. Simple API stack. So we create the API. We link up our Lambda functions. We tell CDK where the code lives. We create the Lambda integrations and attach those to our resources. So we have our REST API URL, which will be the default one, /products. We can use a get request, and that uses the get all products integration, which returns all of our products. Same with the cart resource. We've got a new path on the API, which we've called cart, a method to post data, and that's going to use the create cart integration. Now we need to deploy this. So we need to take it into main. So let's open up main.js. From here, we're going to import CDK. That's going to be require AWS CDK lib. Going to create a new app. CDK.app. And then we need to bring in our simple API stack, which is inside constructs. So we can do new simple API stack, and you can see it's already bringing it in. Thank you, IntelliSense. Pass in the app as the scope, name it simple. Let's call it REST API stack. And let's give it a generic number, so 002, and then we've got no props. Okay, so if I didn't make any spelling errors, we should be able to run CDK deploy, not destroy. And again, you should have your IAM user in your CDK JSON, so you can deploy with the correct user. And we're going to run deploy all. It's going to ask you if you want to deploy these changes, and you're going to hit yes. So once the deployment has finished, we want to look at the terminal and grab the URL that is output. It will be this URL, but then also the stage name, which is prod right now. In the future, we'll look at how to do different stages, like production and staging. For now, let's grab this URL, and we're going to make a new request. So we have our base URL, and then we had a resource called products, which took a GET request, I believe, and that should return all of our items. There we go. So we have a response with all of our items in JSON. So now let's test our post request. So we know that our get all items is working. Let's just copy one of our items as a demonstration. I'm going to create a object to pass up to our cart URL. I'm going to wrap our item in curly braces and send it up as an object. I believe it was cart, and it was a post request. So let's send that and see what happens. Okay, so we get cart created. Now let's head over to our Lambda, and I'll show you the reason why I console.logged this data. So here inside the console, we've gone through Lambdas. We've found our function, which is called simple REST API stack. And the function is create cart function. Now from here, we need to go to monitor, and then view CloudWatch logs. Now from here, you're going to see all the requests that have been sent to that URL. If we click into the most recent one, we're going to see some data here. So if we open these up, a lot of people ask where the console.log data goes, and this is where you'll find it. So if you're testing something out or debugging something in a very basic way, just to get a proof of concept, you can log things out here. There's a number of ways to do logging, but this is probably the quickest and easiest way, but I wouldn't recommend this in production. But you can see here our post request is working. We've got this data off of the event.body and passed the JSON. So our post request is working as expected. So from this simple demonstration, you know how to do a post request, how to get the data off of the event.body, pass it, and then do whatever you need to do with it. Maybe you need to add it to a database. Maybe you need to use the ID from that to get something from the database. And you also know how to do a GET request to just get generic information from an endpoint. You also know how to set up the Lambdas, create the integrations, and how to add resources to your REST API URL. You can add GET requests and POST requests and specify the paths. So from here, you can probably extrapolate this into a number of different API routes, but we'll look at databases in the coming videos. So now, as good housekeeping, let's do CDK destroy all, just to make sure that we clean up after ourselves and we haven't got any resources that aren't being used that could cost us money in the future. So let's run destroy all, hit yes, and there we go, we're all cleaned up. Okay, so thank you for watching that video. Like and subscribe so you can follow along as we build out more serverless applications using more of the AWS services and deploying all of it as code using AWS CDK.